And now, welcome our next speaker.
I'm Michelle Holland. I'm the City Councillor for Ward 35, City of Toronto, but I'm also the Chief Advocate for the innovation economy. So I'm thrilled to be here on this most important conversation. I want to start out really by saying that the change leadership is such an important role in this conversation. I've been discussing this at length for the past number of years, but really the change leadership is really moving the dial on that conversation. So I want to start out by talking about just my role specifically. So it's the Chief Advocate for the Innovation Economy, which is the first role ever created in Canada for any municipality. So, and I actually championed to have this role. So I'm gonna take it back to my story of how I got here, and then where I'm leading change at the City of Toronto. So I'll first start by saying that I worked federally and provincially. I worked for Deputy Prime Minister, and then I worked for a number of ministers at Queen's Park, and then I actually ran for office in 2006, and I lost my first election by 89 votes. So I say that because if you lose, you should lose huge. If you lose by 89 votes, you constantly think about, where did I go wrong? Which street didn't I canvass 7 times, right? 89 votes, if you can believe it. So I was a front runner, and what happens to front runners at the municipal level, there's not a party system, as we know, here in Canada, at the municipal level. And I am a Liberal, though, but what happens is that I was a front runner, and people thought, Michelle, you're just going to win, and I can sit home. So unfortunately, that's what happened. But I'll tell you that, as I always say, good things come out of that, and you just have to find that silver lining. I ended up going to work in government relations, and I worked for clean tech and biotech companies, and that's where I got my start. So I went into the private sector, which was a great, phenomenal experience. I worked with Mars. We were starting out Mars way back then under McGuinty, and through his leadership, and the foundations of Mars began. I worked with clean tech and biotech companies, which gave me sort of that background. And then I ran for office again in 2010. And I cleaned my incumbent's clock, and I won by 52% of the plurality, which was huge. So when I got elected, Rob Ford was our mayor, and that was disrupting times, as we all know. So I learned a lot about disruption during those 4 years. I was one of only 2 female sitting councillors that were on the entire executive. Even though I'm a Liberal, I did sit on the executive, and I thought that was a powerful voice to be at the executive level. And then in 2014, obviously we have a new mayor under Mayor John Tory. And what changed for me then was I sort of think in these 4-year increments, and I thought, what do I want to do to lead change at the City of Toronto in a different way? I've already served 4 years. Where do I want to go in the next 4 years? And I had 2 hats. One was to professionalize our agencies, boards, and commissions. And so under John Tory, he appointed me as chair of our corporations nominating panel, and I appoint to our most important corporate boards at the city. So Toronto Hydro, TCHC, Waterfront Toronto, and I point to those boards. And we've professionalized it and created a skills matrix. And we're now at 44% women on our corporate boards, as opposed to the private sector, thank you, where we're about 13%. So we're still working on the private sector, but leading by example. There's also obviously diversity within that component as well. I learned a lot about gender diversity and diversity in general. And so and my second hat was this, and that's why I'm here to talk about today. So I thought about, what is it that we really need? And as you recall, you may recall this in 2014, I know it seems a long time ago now, but if you can believe it, Uber was not as well known, obviously, as it is now, but Uber was disrupting on the scene. Policymakers and regulators were saying, what do we do with this? How do we face this? What are we doing? There's a huge velocity of change. We know that it's the 4th industrial revolution. We know it's the new innovation economy. But what are we doing as policymakers to help enhance that? What are we doing to work with technology and innovation rather than oppose it, which most politicians do? Politicians don't like change because there's people affected by change. We know that. We know the reports out right now from Deloitte to Brookfield Institute, Mars coming out with a report, and also from RBC showing that 55% of jobs will be transformed in the next 5 years. So what are we doing to prepare our workforce for our changing economy? What are we doing for that change? So then I said to our Mayor, John Tory, I said, I would love this job, and I would love to create a role, which is the role that I'm in with Chief Advocate for the Innovation Economy, or create a committee. We decided to create the role. So then I was sprung into the role. I'd been doing a deep dive into the ecosystem and learning. I set up a advisory council of the best and the brightest across the city, CEOs from educational institutions, DMZ to Mars, to huge corporations, to scaling up to startups. You know everybody that was at the table. So we set up, and I set up an advisory panel to advise me on what's happening in the ecosystem. What is it that we need to champion? So I found two parts of my mandate out of that. One was Toronto is doing exponentially well. We're punching above our weight. But when I hear from consul generals across the seas and that are located here in Toronto, they're saying, Michelle, the word just isn't getting out. We know about Montreal, but we don't know about Toronto. We're not hearing about how phenomenal and how amazing that we're doing here. We know we are. We're obviously ranked number 2 with the Amazon bid. I know we're in the top 20, but I know that we're down to the second, top 2 are being considered. So we know that we're doing amazing, but the word isn't getting out. And when the mayor would travel abroad or I would travel abroad, the problem is we didn't have a story. We didn't have our narrative, unlike different cities or different countries. And so we decided to create a brand. And through that, we'll be launching the brand later this year, but we'll be elevating Toronto's brand through that and through our own narrative. We need to tell Toronto's story. So that was one aspect. The second aspect was, what do we do in the face of change? And that's what I want to tell you about today. So what do we do with all of these, with all of the velocity of change, with people, with residents being impacted, and sort of 3 buckets. So we have corporations that are building and developing. We have residents that are being affected. We have educational institutions that are trying to prepare that workforce. And we have government that's trying to enhance and support our economy through helping and supporting technology and companies such as yourselves. But we have to work collectively as a whole. Any of the futurists that I speak to globally around the world all say the same thing. We can't do it alone. The government will not be here to solve the problem alone. We know that 55% of people will be affected, that jobs will be transformed, and that we have to prepare our workforce in terms of skilling up, and also students in making sure that they're ready through experiential learning, through different aspects, and changing the educational system to make sure that we're preparing our workforce and students. Not only, I'd say we call it now K to Gray. So we know that it's all about lifelong learning. We know that our educational institutions must change. And these are huge entities, just like government. So we know government, these big entities like corporations, and we know educational institutions are tough to change. They're not agile. And how are we learning to transform and be agile and making sure that we have leadership that's enabling that throughout their organizations? So through my role at the city level, we've done that internally. So we have a civic innovation office where we're working with the private sector. We have new innovation that's taking place through new hires that we've done with our Chief Resiliency Officer and with our Chief Transformation Officer and our Chief Innovation Officer. So we're working with, those are my counterparts at the city, to make sure that the city's moving along. And then the third part was, I would say, my idea with Digital Literacy Day. So that's actually being launched tomorrow. And it's the first of its kind. So it's the first ever of its kind in Canada and that we know of really globally. So I'll tell you how it came about, was that we were thinking about, I was talking to John Tory, to our mayor, and I was saying, we have to concern ourselves. We can't hide our heads in the sands. Politicians notoriously do that. We try to obfuscate or try to prevent change, but we know with this type of velocity that we do not have the ability to do that any longer. So what are we doing in order to prepare that? And so I got into a room with some key leaders from different corporations, and I said, I want a day, we'll call it Digital Literacy Day, But what are we going to do? Almost like I would say, what Bell Let's Talk did for mental health and mental health awareness. So we know that affects 50% of the population, and it's the same with digital literacy. I would say everyone. Tech, we know, is horizontal. It's no longer verticals. Verticals are merging. So we know everything is tech. And it will be. It will continue to be that way, and the velocities change. So what are we doing to prepare our residents and our workforce for the future? And we thought about this day, about what we're going to do to engage with everyone across the city. So tomorrow there will be 190 different programs across the city. We have over 150 corporations involved and nonprofit organizations that are coming together to unify. And what they will do is display anything. My idea was whatever you can imagine, do it. Just engage with the private sector. Engage with those that are from lower socioeconomic areas, and especially those that would not normally be part of the process. We're blessed here today. You know, here today, this is not what everybody has access to. I'll say for my area, it's the second lowest income ward in all of Toronto. A lot of my residents grow up in TCHC, and they do not wake up to this type of environment whatsoever. They don't have access to it, they don't see it, and if you don't see it, you don't experience it. And you don't hold that knowledge and that perception. So what we've done is we've engaged everyone from Move the Dial, Women in Tech, Girls in Coding, to vets in coding. If you can imagine it, that's what we're doing. So tomorrow will be the first time that we discover and that we talk about and that we engage and move the dial on everything that has to do with digital literacy. So we want to make sure that we're galvanizing and that we're discussing the conversations that we're having today. Again, we're privy to this amazing information in this room, but not everybody is. If you're a driver and you are going to be AI'd out, because we know the autonomous vehicle is coming, we have TTC and unions at the city. What are we doing? What are we doing to engage those people and make sure that they're ready and that they're ready and prepared for the workforce of I would not say tomorrow, of today. We know that you can't possibly change from a driver into something else within 2 years, but we know it's coming in 2 years. So what are we doing to make sure that they're skilling up and that they're exposed to that, and that we're working with unions, and that we're working with the city, and that we're working with corporations and government in order to transform that? So tomorrow is the big day, and I hope that you'll all attune to that, or that if you're not engaged, that you will just simply, if you look on any social media, you can follow and see what's happening across the city. And again, I just want to say that it's been phenomenal to be here today. It's such an important issue. I cannot tell you enough about the number of conversations I've had recently about what the city is doing and what government should be doing in helping to lead that change, especially within our educational institutions and the corporations, and how we can prepare our workforce for tomorrow. So that's my conversation for leading change at the City of Toronto, and I hope that you'll have some question and answers. I'd love to engage with you further.
Okay.
Thanks.
We most definitely will have questions. Questions? Okay, we have one right here in front.
Hi. Hi. My daughter's 15 in grade 9 and regularly comes home and says, I don't get taught anything in the classroom. I'm bored out of my mind. What is the city going to do so that by the time she graduates grade 12, she's in a position to move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's definitely placed within the provincial body. The provincial government's responsible for our educational system. And that's a key problem. I mean, the educational system and the Ministry of Education that are setting out that type of education and not making sure that we have experiential learning and a different format for learning, which we know that they're attuned to, but moving that, I would say, that realm into making sure that it's trickled down into the educational system is something that they're working on. I think that they are not working on it fast enough. I hear about that all the time. One example of what we're doing for Digital Literacy Days, we do have one school where we've taken as an example that we're hoping to replicate and scale within the next year. So that's taking place at Hillcrest Public School. And we have Google, the Knowledge Society, which is a experiential learning educational school that just started last year. And we have STEM, and they've created a STEM lab right in that school just out of this day tomorrow. So we're hoping to spread that right across the city by next year, and hoping that every school can partake in that, because that's exactly what the frustration is with children, is the fact that it's the old way of doing things and this old model that is not engaging. Every student from, like I say, K to Gray, we say now, because it's all about lifelong learning. So it will never end. As soon as she graduates, it will go on to university and then, or college, and then post, and then we'll continue on until you're retired, or maybe even further after retirement. So that's the conversations that we're having now with the universities and with the ministry, but whether it's really their influence at the provincial level on how they implement that. So we'll be watching. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Hi, Michelle. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about Collision Conference coming here now, Sidewalk Labs, some of the other major innovative kind of projects that are happening within the city, so that give us a bit of a perspective on where we're headed?
Absolutely.
Is
Great
that a
great
conference of
question.
interest? Collision Conference? Change
Collision.
Leadership Conference? I'm
Yes.
kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's okay. So we'll be having the change leadership at Collision. You'll definitely, we'll be hooking you up there. So I went to Lisbon to the WebEx Summit. If anybody, a lot of you would be familiar with WebEx, which is the largest tech conference in the world, and it's 65,000 people that attend that in Lisbon. It's held in the fall in November. They don't pay for their sponsorship, or they don't pay for their speakers. They get global celebrity speakers, and celebrities go to it because it is quite dynamic and engaging. We went over, and Collision, which is currently located in New Orleans, needed a new home. They were looking to Toronto. Toronto was pretty much the only place that they were looking, and we secured the deal right there in Lisbon. So, and that Collision will be coming here to Toronto in the spring. Yep, and it'll be here absolutely for 4 years, and it's quite a phenomenal. It'll have over 35,000 people in attendance, and we have the airport and the hotel system to support that type of conference. But it will be the largest tech conference that we have here in the city.
Yeah.
Yep. Sidewalk Labs.
Yeah.
Yes, the microphone's gone. So Sidewalk Labs is one, and then when we talk about autonomous cars, we talk about that preparation for the city innovation side of things. We talk about nanotechnology, we talk about sensors being put into the roadway. There's a lot of things to cover. Can you just give us a perspective of where the city's focusing on some of these things?
Yep.
As we start to move towards these areas?
Absolutely. So the city is trying to engage with the private sector in terms of doing piloting. We've done a complete overhaul on our procurement system, and that's currently underway. Obviously, we had a problem with any type of sole sourcing, which was a problem if we were working with corporations that wanted to pilot in the city. With Sidewalk Labs, they're going to be doing something exponential down there. I think it's absolutely amazing, and running a number of pilots. We're closely engaged with what they're doing down there, and they're closely engaged with the city in terms of getting input and the public input in terms of what they're doing in that realm down there. So that will be completely dynamic and I think innovative in the sense that running a number of pilots down there and having test use cases so that we can implement that at the City of Toronto, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and I love what we're doing from a Toronto perspective, and even just what's happening in the ecosystem now and in the community, whereby it's all about partnerships. So I was kidding when I talked about conflicts of interest, but it's really all about partnerships in terms of when we work together, that's when we begin to see real change, as opposed to working against each other. Together we can do more than just, individually. And, congratulations to Toronto for being able to bring Collision Conference. That's awesome. That's big. So congratulations on that. Awesome. Where do we have the next question? Okay, she's got the mic.
Hi, Michelle. My name is Susan. In addition to my day job, I do a lot of volunteer work, and one of them is an organization that helps underprivileged youth try to find employment. And one of the fears I have with this whole AI and digital is people getting left behind, especially communities that don't have access to education. Is the city prepared to support organizations that will help with things like STEM, learning, and innovation, things like that?
Yeah, great question. So actually, the Digital Literacy Day, the whole theme of that is leave no one behind. So it actually targets a lower socioeconomic areas such as mine, people that are in those type of jobs that, again, would not have access to the change that we're facing, maybe not even the knowledge around that type of change and how fast it's coming. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but we know that it's completely upon us. So the city is engaging. What we envision is having these global partnerships. So it's not just the government spending, because we don't have endless amounts of money. We know that corporations want to invest in this area. That's why a lot of them are housed with their labs here in Mars, because they see that as something that's very important. So you will see, and I've seen, a shift in the funding that's coming from these corporations into helping to move the dial in terms of this type of sponsorship. So they are helping. That's the whole premise of the Digital Literacy Day. So it'll have corporations which are sponsoring, let's say, girls learning code, or girls in STEM, or vets in coding, or cybersecurity, and or robotics. And so they're sponsoring that, and they see that as something that would be part of their core values. So we look at it as a holistic approach, because again, there's no possible way that you're ever going to see the government be able to support this type of transformation. We can't do it alone, because we simply don't have the funding to do it. So we have to rely on the corporates to come in and help sponsor these type of organizations that you're involved with. So it's really a true partnership, making sure that government's involved, but making sure that the corporations are there at the table as well, and they want to be. It's a great question. Thanks.
Thank you. Where do we have the mic? Where's the next question? Okay. That would be, yeah. Do you have a question here? Okay. I'll just give him this, and then you can ask that next.
Hi. Looking forward, I'm curious about how are you thinking about maintaining the momentum that you've started to build in the face of the political evolution cycle as leadership changes from government to government?
Right. That's a great question. So I'll just speak about the City of Toronto that we anticipate. Obviously, we have our election, which is this fall. And I'll be supporting John Tory. I mean, I would imagine that he would get reelected. So we're hoping to have some consistency in the next term of council, which will be a full 4 years. So at least at our level, we have the ability to have some level of stability, because it's a 4-year term, without it being a minority government where you do see that disruption. Obviously in 1 week from now, we will see a completely different government in place, and we will have to work with that government. So that's a great question. Like, how do we continue that dialogue? I mean, I really do believe, though, that at all 3 levels of government, the mindset is completely focused on transformation, innovation. I mean, even Navdeep, right, Yvonne was speaking. So here, and so that's their engagement. We know that all 3 levels of government are aware and that they're engaged. And it's just a matter of those 3 levels of government being able to work together. So hoping that we have consistency at the municipal level with the next 4 years, and then we'll see what happens next week with the provincial level. It's a great question, though.
Thank you.